Welcome, brave souls, to a journey into the heart of darkness. Tonight, we venture into the ancient Colosseum of Rome, a place steeped in history and haunted by the echoes of its bloody past. Prepare yourself for two spine-chilling horror stories that push the boundaries of fear. These tales are not for the faint of heart, as they delve into intense horror elements, disturbing themes, and supernatural terror. So dim the lights, gather your courage, and let's step into the shadows of the Colosseum. Story 1. The Blood That Never Dried. I had always been fascinated by history, so when I got the chance to visit Rome, the Colosseum was at the top of my list. But I didn't want a tourist experience. I wanted to see the real thing, to feel the history beneath my feet. So I paid a local guide extra to let me stay after hours, alone. At midnight, I stepped onto the ancient stone floor where thousands had died. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something else. Something metallic, like rust or blood. The full moon cast long shadows over the ruins, making the place look like a graveyard of bones. Then I saw it. The ground in the center of the arena was wet. I knelt down and touched it. Dark, sticky, blood, fresh. My stomach twisted. This was impossible. The last gladiator fight had been centuries ago. A soft clink echoed through the vast ruins. Like metal on metal, I turned, my breath hitching. From the darkness of the underground hypogeum, where the gladiators once waited for their fate, a shadow moved. Slowly, methodically, a tall figure in rusted armor stepped forward. His face was wrapped in shadows, but his eyes, those dead, hollow eyes, locked onto me. He lifted his sword. I stumbled back, but the Colosseum was different now. The ruined walls looked whole again, torches flickered, and I heard screaming. Thousands of voices, chanting for blood. The ghostly gladiator lunged. I ran, my heartbeat hammering in my ears, but the ground beneath me felt like sinking sand. Then hands burst from the dirt, clawing at my ankles, rotten, broken fingers, pulling, grasping. The dead were rising. Spectators, slaves, victims, all those who had died here. A voice rasped in my ear. "Entertain us," I screamed, struggling to break free, but the cold grip of the damned held tight. And then, darkness. When I woke up, I was outside, lying on the cobblestone street near the Colosseum. My hands and clothes were covered in dust. My fingers ached as if I had been gripping something tightly. In my right hand, I held a rusted, blood-stained gladius. I threw it to the ground and ran, but deep inside, I knew the Colosseum had marked me. Somewhere beneath its ancient stones, the dead still whispered my name, and one day they would come to collect me. The rusted gladius lay at my feet, its blade dark, with something far too fresh to belong to an ancient relic. My breath came in ragged gasps as I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. Lack of sleep. Maybe I had fallen and hit my head. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had touched something inside the Colosseum, something that should have been left undisturbed. I forced myself to my feet and stumbled away from the blood-stained sword, my mind racing. The streets of Rome were eerily quiet at this hour, the occasional street lamp flickering against the stone walls. I needed to get back to my hotel. I needed to forget. But the Colosseum wasn't done with me. As I walked, my ears picked up a sound, faint at first but growing louder, a rhythmic clink-clink like metal striking stone. I turned and my blood ran cold. A figure was following me. It moved slowly, deliberately, stepping into the pale glow of a street lamp. It was the gladiator, the same hollow-eyed specter that had lunged at me inside the ruins. His armor was dented, rusted with age, but his grip on the sword was tight, unshakable. He wasn't just watching me, he was hunting me. Panic seized my limbs, and I bolted down the empty streets, my footsteps echoing wildly. My hotel was close. If I could just make it inside, I could. The world shifted. In an instant, the streets of modern Rome were gone. The neon signs, the parked cars, the distant hum of the city, all vanished. I skidded to a stop, my breath coming in sharp, desperate gulps. I was back inside the Colosseum, but not as a tourist. The stone walls towered high, untouched by time. The night sky above was filled with the roar of an unseen crowd, their cheers and screams blending into one deafening mass. Torches flickered along the corridors, casting long shadows, and then I saw them. Hundreds of figures lined the edge of the arena, watching me. Their faces were pale, almost translucent, their eyes empty voids, spectators from centuries past. A low, guttural growl rumbled behind me. I turned. The gladiator was there. This time, he wasn't alone. Dozens of figures emerged from the tunnels, warriors in shredded tunics and battered helmets, their flesh rotted and torn. Their weapons gleamed under the torchlight, crusted with blood that had never dried. They surrounded me, forming a circle, their shadows stretching like clawed fingers across the sand. Then the crowd fell silent. A single voice echoed through the vast Colosseum. "Fight!" My body refused to move, but the ghosts had no patience. The nearest gladiator lunged, his sword slicing toward me. I barely dodged in time, stumbling back. The crowd screamed with excitement. I turned, looking for an escape, but there was none. The only way out was to entertain them. Another attacker rushed forward and I reacted instinctively. My hand shot out, gripping the rusted gladius at my side, the same blade I had thrown away in the streets of Rome. But here, in this place, it had found its way back to me. I had no choice. I raised the sword. The next few moments were a blur of violence and terror. I swung wildly, deflecting blows, feeling the impact rattle through my bones. Every time I struck, the crowd roared louder, their voices shaking the very walls. But I couldn't keep up. A sword slashed across my arm, white-hot pain exploding through me. Another struck my leg, sending me to my knees. The gladiators closed in, their dead eyes unblinking. I was going to die here. The ground beneath me trembled, and suddenly, darkness, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in my hotel bed, drenched in sweat. My breathing was ragged, my body aching. It was a dream. It had to be a dream. But as I sat up, my stomach dropped. On the bedside table lay the rusted gladius. Fresh blood dripped from its edge, and from outside, carried by the night wind, I heard it, the distant roar of the Colosseum crowd, still waiting for me to finish the fight. Story 2. The Shadow in the Tunnels. Some say the Colosseum is haunted. They don't know the half of it. I was a security guard at the Colosseum. The night shift. Easy job, right? Just walk around, make sure no one sneaks in, and wait for dawn. But after what happened last night, I'm never going back. Around 2 a.m., my radio crackled. It was the other guard, Marco. "You see that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "See what?" I replied. "In the tunnels." The Colosseum's underground tunnels were where they kept the animals, the prisoners, the gladiators before they fought. The place where men waited to die. I sighed and grabbed my flashlight. "I swear if this is another stray cat—" "No," Marco interrupted. "Someone's down there. I saw movement." That got my attention. No one was supposed to be inside after hours. I headed down, my footsteps echoing against the stone walls. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of mildew and something rotten. I turned a corner and stopped dead. A figure stood in the darkness ahead, barely visible, tall, wrapped in tattered cloth, its head tilted as if listening. "Hey!" I called out. "You're not supposed to be here." It didn't move. I stepped forward. My flashlight flickered. Then the thing rushed me. I barely had time to react before it was inches from my face. But it didn't touch me. It just stopped. Up close, I saw its face. Pale, stretched skin, hollowed-out eyes, and a mouth that didn't move. But I heard it whispering. "He's watching." Then it vanished. Just gone. I turned and sprinted back up the tunnel. Marco was waiting for me at the exit, his face pale. "We're leaving now," he said. "We didn't even clock out. We just ran." This morning, I went online looking for stories about the Colosseum's ghosts, and I found something horrifying. The shadow I saw? There are ancient Roman records of a watcher, a cursed spirit said to guard the Colosseum at night, a soul bound to the tunnels. Some say he was a traitor, executed in the arena and condemned to keep watch for eternity. Others believe he's the last face prisoners saw before they died. One thing is certain, those who see him don't last long. And now, I've seen him. I don't know how much time I have, but if you ever visit the Colosseum at night, stay out of the tunnels. Because he's watching, and if he sees you, you won't make it out. The air in the tunnels beneath the Colosseum was thick, damp with the scent of ancient stone and something else, something rotten. My footsteps echoed against the cold walls as I pressed deeper into the labyrinth, my phone's flashlight flickering. I should have turned back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still down here. I checked the photos on my phone again. The last one I had taken before the tour guide rushed us out, the eerie shadow that hadn't been there when I took the picture. It was tall, almost human-shaped, but twisted, its edges blurred like smoke. I swallowed hard. Ahead of me, the tunnel split into two paths. The left tunnel sloped downward into pitch darkness. The right was faintly illuminated by a flickering emergency light. A sound, a deep, guttural whisper, curling through the air like a breath against my ear. "This way." The voice came from the left tunnel. I felt a cold chill crawl down my spine, but my feet moved before my mind could stop them. My heart pounded as I stepped forward, deeper into the darkness. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature plunged. My breath came out in visible puffs. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick and suffocating. I kept moving, my phone's battery dipping lower. Then the whispering started again, but this time it was everywhere. Soft voices layered on top of each other, murmuring in Latin. I couldn't understand the words, but the urgency in them was clear. They weren't calling me forward anymore, they were warning me. I turned, ready to bolt, but I wasn't alone. A figure loomed at the end of the tunnel. Tall, shadowed, featureless. The same thing from my photo. And now it was moving toward me. My legs refused to work. I stood frozen as the shadow glided closer. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest like invisible hands. My phone flickered again, and for a brief second, the figure was illuminated. It wasn't a shadow at all. It was a man, or what used to be a man. His face was wrapped in a decayed leather mask, his sunken eyes filled with something far worse than malice. His body was covered in the tattered remnants of a gladiator's uniform, his skeletal fingers curled around a rusted dagger. He smiled, then he lunged. I turned and ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, the walls warping, shifting. No longer the ruins of an ancient stadium, but something else, something alive. I could hear the scrape of metal behind me, the figure giving chase, moving faster than anything should. I reached a dead end. A heavy stone wall loomed before me, carved with symbols I couldn't understand. I pressed my hands against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Please," I whispered. A whisper answered back. "Run." The wall moved, not outward, but inward. A gaping black void opened where the stone had been. Without thinking, I threw myself inside. Darkness swallowed me. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was the enraged shriek of the shadow behind me. I woke up gasping for air. I was lying at the entrance of the Colosseum. The sun was up, tourists milling around, taking pictures, laughing. No one seemed to notice me. No one seemed to see me. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I opened the camera. I turned it toward myself, desperate for reassurance. The screen reflected my face, but standing behind me, just over my shoulder, was the shadow. Still watching, still waiting, and this time, it wasn't going anywhere. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey through the haunted halls of the Colosseum. We hope these stories left you with chills and a lingering sense of dread. If you enjoyed these spine-tingling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more horror content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What was the scariest part for you? Until next time, stay safe and keep the lights on, because you never know what might be lurking in the dark.